Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Rebellious Wellness Lifestyle. My guest today is Dr. Nima Rahmany, and we're focused on relationships today. Because, heavens, it's important that if we're in a relationship, that we have a solid foundation, and if we are looking for a relationship, that we clean a bunch of stuff up first, right?
Yeah, Greg, it's really important that there's a distinction I would constantly see in my chiropractic practice, which was people who had health troubles. I would ask them, when did it start? When they're chronic issues, when did it begin? And they would always say 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And then I would ask them what was going on. And what started the downside, the downturn of their health was a relational rupture.
Mm.
So there's something within our nervous systems, which we all know we all are wired for connection, that when there's a disconnection or a rupture within a relational attachment, mentally, physically, emotionally, cellularly, on a cellular level, our bodies go into a shutdown mode because of the loss of connection. So there is a huge overlap between relational health and emotional physical health. And I was fascinated by that in my
Hmm.
chiropractic practice, and I wanted to explore it not just in my life, but then it became my new dharma was to teach it.
I love that. And we just started talking, so I didn't even tell people. Actually, when you mentioned chiropractic, they're probably thinking, wait, chiropractor, but he's doing relationships. So
Yeah.
you have become the leading expert in shadow work and emotional relationship regulation, healing wounds. And this is after a successful career as a chiropractor.
Yeah.
So you told us how that
Yeah.
switch occurred. And you do talk about your own journey, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about
Yeah.
that of you, how did you get trigger proof? How did you heal your toxic issues?
Yeah. Here I am helping people primarily with stress related disorders, coming in with aches and pains. And what was neat was I noticed that whenever I would educate people on how to develop skills for a stressful world, their chronic issues would become much better. And so I didn't have the time in my practice, so I started creating these workshops on Saturday in my practice. And as I developed in my own personal growth, I felt called to share all of the things that I learned to heal from the challenges, the stressful challenges of running a business, of having a family, of all of those things. And it wasn't until I found myself stuck in a really toxic relationship. Here I am teaching one thing publicly, but living in a really toxic, what's called a push pull dynamic of the anxious avoidant trap. I didn't understand attachment styles, but the more that I wanted my freedom and independence, the more she would want more connection. And it just became this really toxic dance where the more she would pursue, the more distance that I wanted. And then it would just go back and forth in this really toxic cycle until it became abusive. It developed and developed until the point where I got triggered and my prefrontal cortex shut off, and the hands that are usually used to help heal people actually reached out in anger, and I hit her. And I woke up and was like, what the hell just happened? How did I get to that place? So this was like the start of an unraveling when that happened. There was some push and pull still within the dynamic where I was trying to make amends. And over the next year, I had to really understand, how do I get out of this situation? And so I wrote a book about the entire journey of getting out of a really toxic dynamic, because sometimes it's not being in the relationship that's dangerous, whether it's physical abuse or reputational abuse. It's trying to get out and
Mm.
the consequences of getting out. So what I realized was I felt trapped, and I went all in. I stopped working. I stopped distracting myself by being Dr. Nima and trying to help other people. And I just went into this journey of working on myself and finding out, how was it that somebody who was a person who was dedicated to helping others heal, how is it that I reacted that way? And I started to the journey. I studied polyvagal theory, somatic experiencing, shadow work. And this is where the concept of becoming trigger proof was born. I realized that no matter how much therapy that you've done, how much personal development or Tony Robbins events that you've been to. There is in your body, there is a blueprint of your attachment, of the unresolved attachments from childhood. And unconsciously, without paying attention, without looking towards becoming what I call trigger proof, we are unconsciously called to repeat these patterns as a means of finishing our unfinished business. So in a nutshell, I end up stopping becoming a chiropractor and going in and really becoming obsessed with learning how we get into these dynamics, how we can basically stop, and if we can break that cycle, can we then create a blueprint neurologically for then having healthy and secure relationships? And I did the first, I understood the second, and then now I'm in a really healthy relationship that's secure. And we have a beautiful, and the recording of this, we have a beautiful 5-year-old 4 years old, who is teaching me more about love and life than anything. And I've dedicated my life to teaching people how to become trigger proof. I have a community of people who are really wanting to learn how to break that push and pull anxious avoidant cycle within relationships, how to heal codependency and what's called trauma bonds. And so it's called the Cycle Breakers Collective. And I teach people how to do that. And I travel and I teach. And that's my new purpose now after I left chiropractic.
It sounds like a very big purpose. You got a long road ahead of you, because I know that we, as you said, these things start in childhood. And I'm wondering how much of our triggers, does it become subconscious? Like we have to learn what's in there, first of all, before we
That's
can
right.
access it and then change it.
Yeah. The thing is, we don't know what's there until we're in a relationship. And there's something about intimate relationships where there's the vulnerability, there's this attachment that sets after about 6 months to a year, where the masks come off and the honeymoon phase is over, where now the attachment hooks are in and you're no longer governed by your kind of adult brain anymore. It's the child brain that takes over. And now what's happening is our relational dynamics from childhood start to come to play. And we don't know until they're actually triggered. And a trigger is a wounding that's stuck within our bodies from a trauma, which is not about what's happened to you, but what's happening inside of you, that gets stuck, that didn't have a really safe and empathetic witness. And what happens is we go through life and going through events that similarly activate or trigger those past wounds. And in that moment, we are no longer in the present. We are now regressed back and are reliving that same experience as a child. For example, if you had a parent, you had a mother who was emotionally not there because her nervous system was dysregulated, she was going through unhealthy attachment with your father, and she wasn't really there present for you. One day she was, the other day she was totally different, and you didn't have that consistency. In your nervous system, you have this experience of hypervigilance with attachments, that you start to feel anxious when the partner starts to pull away, because it reminds you of just like when your mother would pull away. And so unconsciously, you will be drawn to people who bring up those same wounds, because that's what you understood that love was, number one. And number two, there's an unconscious pull within these parts of yourself that need resolution. So you'll be pulled towards people that bring up those same experiences, and because it's familiar, and you will act them out again and again until you wake up and stop playing the victim and say, all right, there's something within me that I got to learn. And that's really what the work of becoming trigger proof, the trigger proof process, is all about.
I remember when I was in my maybe 30s, I heard the concept codependent, and I had been in that kind of relationship and found another one after I got rid of the first one. But I
You're
really,
like, wow, that's me.
that's me. I don't want this anymore. Oh, but wait, I wasn't really completely sure I didn't want it anymore. So I went back to a place where
It's
it
familiar.
was just that. And that what you're talking about to me sounds like the building blocks of a codependent person.
Correct.
You take what you can when you can get it.
Yeah.
And I think somehow we keep thinking, even though we see us get rejected now and again, If I just go back one more time, it'll change. If I'm just nicer, if I clean the dishes better, if I do the laundry better, there are all these things that were not
Yeah.
enough, not right.
Mhm.
But of course, that pleases this partner only so much and for so long.
Yeah.
So how do you
How do
break
you deal with
that
that? Yeah.
codependency? I know how I did it. I'm just wondering, you're the expert
Yeah.
here.
So the first step is the awareness that, what codependency actually is, my sense of safety depends on your validation and approval of
Mm,
me.
perfect.
That your disconnect, your dysregulation becomes my dysregulation. There's no boundary energetically between what's happening inside of you and me. It's like a skinless peach. It's like a boundaryless, like a jellyfish, that my sense of worth and being is dependent on how you're feeling. Your feelings are become mine. It's like you sneeze and then I apologize for it, type of thing. That's what that is. And that is a blueprint that begins in childhood. When a child isn't seen, isn't mirrored emotionally, isn't heard, and feels like they must perform in order to have love, in order to have approval, that wound causes a split. And the child needs to find a solution to this. And the solution, there's two solutions to them. All right. So to heal this, we have to go back and understand it first. So I'm going to explain it to you. The first solution to this experience of not feeling seen is to create this grandiose false sense of self that says, I am all knowing, all good, all powerful, and as a solution to this experience of not being seen. So you create this false self that then looks to gain that validation through an external lens. So I'm going to create this false self and I'm going to project it outward and get as many people to love me so that then I can feel seen. That solution is called narcissism.
I was
The
gonna say.
second solution for this experience of not feeling seen is to then say, listen, I'm going to be whatever my environment needs me to be. I'm going to take that pain of not being seen and internalize it. The first one externalizes that pain and that anger and externalizes it and draws that anger outward, narcissism. The second type, codependency, takes that anger of not feeling seen and turns it inwards against oneself and says, I'm going to blur my boundaries and I'm going to be whatever the environment needs me to be, and creates another false self of this good girl, this good boy, this nice guy, this whatever that you need me to be, I will be, so that then I can get validation and approval. And so you notice that the narcissist and the codependent, they are the flip side of one another. And they actually are a mirror, like a perfect, like moth to a flame for one another. And so this wound grows up and they are literally mirrors of one another. So in later in adult life, this experience of codependency, that codependent who it all is from a lack of self-worth and a lack of self-awareness, will meet the narcissist that begins the dynamic with the love bombing. The I see you, and the narcissist and the codependent strike a deal with one another unconsciously. The deal is, I'm going to be the mother that you never had. Now, it can all, it's male or female. So the masculine narcissist will use validation and love bombing. The female narcissist will use sex bombing, validation, same thing. But here's what it is. The deal is, I'm going to be the mother that you never had. I see you. I understand you. I see you better than anyone else because I have the same wound. And I'm going to be the mother that you didn't have and love you unconditionally through love bombing, sex bombing, whatever. And in exchange, you're going to be my mother. And you're going to prove to me that you're my mother by me being abusive to you, by me degrading you, devaluing you. But you're going to still stay with me because no mother would ever leave their child, no matter how they get treated.
Hmm.
So it's like a covert way of proving that you're going to be my mother by I'm going to devalue you. I'm going to toss you away. I'm going to really abuse you emotionally, maybe physically. I'm going to cast you away and test you to make sure that you're really going to be my mother. And so this dance that happens, the trauma bond begins with the abrupt transition between the love bombing, then the devaluing, and then the discarding. And then finally the codependent says, I can't do this anymore, and says, I'm going to walk away. And that's when it triggers the narcissist's abandonment wound, and they start the hoovering again, and the love bombing begins.
God.
And then the codependent takes them in, as you shared, Greg. And then within a short period of time, the devaluing, once the hooks are in, the devaluing comes in, and then the discarding comes in. And so why does this happen is because both parties are unconsciously trying to individuate from the mother
Hmm.
and unconsciously using one another in that individuation process. In other words, you're trying to divorce your mother through leaving the person.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
so to answer the question, how do you do it? It's not easy. It's like addiction recovery. The way that I guide people through that is by teaching them that this dynamic in this relationship has nothing to do with the relationship and everything to do with your unconscious attempt to break free from the stranglehold that mother or father had on you. And so really the work is not about couples counseling, because that's a waste of time when this is going on. You got to go deeper, and it's an individual hero's journey to healing with those younger parts of you that never were seen, never were heard the way that they needed because of a parent that was not available, didn't have the capacity, likely because they were in a codependent trauma bond. So it's intergenerational, and that's why my community is called the Cycle Breakers Collective, because none of this began in this relational dynamic. It was generations ago. So the
Which
way
is,
that you heal it is by appreciating that this is a lot bigger than you think it is.
and it's a lot bigger than you, the individual. Like you say, it's bigger than you
Correct.
think it is, but it's also, we need a guide or a help, uh, somebody like you. And I'm not just,
I
I'm
did
not
not do
just
it
pimping
alone.
you out there. You didn't ask me to say this, but I'm just
Yeah,
saying, an expert in this stuff and somebody, I always value somebody who's been through what I am looking to go out of or through.
yeah,
I think
yeah,
it really makes a big difference. It's not in every case that you need that, but I really value that in any kind of a coach or mentor.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like this work, it doesn't come from a plaque on the wall.
Right.
Going to a psychotherapist will be helpful to have you validated and your experiences. Oh, this is what happened. It came from this. And you're like, okay, thanks. Because now my clients are like, now what do I do? Like
Mhm.
I've literally walked the path. I've done the work. I've cried the tears. So I created a methodology, a path of step by step of doing it. And breaking free from a trauma bond must be it can't be a cognitive process where you're talking. It must be a felt sense process where the nervous system is involved and you releasing the stranglehold that mom and dad had on you. And that is a whole path. Actually, we're doing it in our container right now, and healing the mother wound, healing the father wound. Like you literally have to become somebody else that's no longer a victim to mom and dad, because you're replaying it in the relational dynamic. So when it happened with me in my last relationship, I was 43 years old. It got abusive. And I was like, how did this happen? And I realized what it was. I was still a child that was afraid of what mom and dad thought. I was really joined at the hip with what they thought. And so I was like, I need to heal from this. I need to break free. I need to, what's called, Carl Jung calls it individuate, break free from the kind of the conditioning and the umbrella, the umbilical cord of mommy and daddy. Even though I was a successful chiropractor, still doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean you have gotten over mom and dad. It just, how do you feel around them and how you're putting on a mask and fearing their rejection or approval or their criticism. Your body is still living in that state of childhood. And I was operating in my relational dynamics still under that umbrella. And so I moved back in with my parents after my last relationship ended for 3 months and worked through all of it and broke free. And now my relationship with them is better than ever. And that's when I was able to have a secure relationship. that wasn't tied to that unfinished business with mom and dad.
I can't remember who taught me this, but they said that if you are not healed from the wounds and you left the relationship because you recognized there was a problem, there was a pattern, there was a thing, if you don't do any work energetically, you're going to bring that same energy back into you because we are energetic beings and the energy is
100%.
there. And you said it's in there. Anybody who's listening who feels like they looking for that next person and can't
Yeah.
seem to find that somebody different, I think there's some work to be done.
There's two aspects to this, Greg. And the first one is, you're right. Once a relational dynamic is done, there's two phases. The first is the self-work that we need to do in order to heal, take responsibility for our part in the dance. This is where people will do they'll be doing therapy, they'll be doing talk therapy, and just trying to deal with the grief of the breakup, the self-work. My invitation is for people to go a lot deeper and to really get to a place of understanding of, why was I the perfect person for that person? What blind spots did I have that made me the perfect candidate for a partner like that? And so getting completion with the self is the first part, is healing the grief. Obviously, there's going to be a state of grief and building back your self-worth. That's the first step. The real work then begins when the new relationship starts, because it's a fantasy to think, oh my God, I did all this work and now I have this new partner and I'm good.
Because they re-trigger all the stuff you think you got rid of.
Exactly. That's why becoming trigger proof doesn't mean trigger less. It means, all right, I'm healed now. I'm ready for a new relationship. And this new partner, after the honeymoon phase is over, will then activate this push and pull dynamic. It will bring up childhood things that come up. Do I yet have the skills now to put those skills that I've learned to use? Because they will come up. Doesn't mean it's going to last forever, but as it comes up, and you're going to trigger them, they're going to trigger you and you're going to trigger them. And the way that they respond will be telling. Either they're going to pull away or they're going to use the trigger for deeper connection. And becoming trigger proof means I'm going to learn the skill of using the triggers that are going to naturally arise in any relationship to connect deeper with myself and connect deeper with the other, and to repair, rather than the fantasy of, oh, I'm going to date somebody who's never going to trigger me. And if they do, it's the wrong person. I'm getting the hell out. So it's a skill. Relationship as a spiritual, becoming trigger proof is really taking on relationship as a spiritual practice.
And I would say, when you must have used the word mindfulness earlier, but that's what comes to mind as my healing journey was progressing. The more I was aware of what triggered me, because you said you have to do the work. What is it that actually triggers me? Why was I a perfect fit for this and this? Somebody who wants you to eat and drink with them all the time because they do that, but you don't want to do that. And I found that when I was out of that relationship, it didn't even have to be another person that could trigger me. Certain situations or a book or a movie, and I'd be like weeping or still. So that's probably the grief process. All of this to say, the work that you're talking about, I don't want people to think it's, let's take a 30-day course and we're good. You don't know where the trigger is going to come from, but that mindfulness of, you did the work to know what it was that triggers you in any different form, and then you
when
can
it
cope
comes
with it.
up, what do I do?
Right.
Yeah.
How do I not react?
Not if.
Right.
I always say trigger proof doesn't mean triggerless. It means responsive. What do I do to self-soothe? And then how do I communicate from my adult self rather than from the child self? Because here's what will happen. The two parts of this dynamic, which it's really important in the journey to really understand your attachment style. I'll give you a link for a quiz to really know what your attachment style is. But generally speaking, the pattern, the negative cycle in these triggers looks like this. There's the anxious one who really finds safety in connection. I need connection in order to feel safe. The thought of disconnection scares me and I need more connection. That anxious person, anxious attachment, will be a perfect match, like a moth to a flame, for the opposite side, which is the avoidant, which is, I'm overwhelmed and I need space. So the one that that responds to distress with needing space is attracted to the polar opposite, which is the one that needs connection. So check this out. Trigger happens. The one that needs space starts to feel like a failure, not good enough, and they cope by distracting, by avoiding, by running away. That's how they deal with their emotional pain, which then triggers the anxious one to feel not good enough, not important. And their coping is to push, to get needy, to judge, to criticize, to blame, which then triggers the avoidance feeling of not enough, which then causes them to cope with that pain by distracting further, by numbing, by running, which then triggers the anxious feeling of not enough and coping strategy of needing more and pushing harder. And so this is called the infinite loop of doom. And without doing the work of becoming trigger proof, you literally go through this, it's called the power struggle phase for decades sometimes until your health. Now you're talking about health. This is where the health thing comes in. How this is tied to health, I really wanted to address that. That cycle of that push and pull dynamic that I just described with the infinite loop of doom wears away at your nervous system, your digestive system, your mental health. And then all of a sudden your adrenals are burnt out. And now you go to the doctor and the doctor doesn't ask about this stuff, nor are they trained to teach you and how to resolve it. Right. So you're now taking pills and meanwhile, you're still in this dynamic and you're getting worse. And this is why I had to leave chiropractic, because I saw this and I wanted to result with that. The second thing that's critical to understand in your health is, do you remember the codependent solution to not feeling seen from childhood? Greg, imagine that feeling of anger of not feeling seen, but the child knows that they cannot express that anger, that their needs are not going to be met. So what they do is they suppress that anger, and suppressed anger over a period of decades becomes a chronic depressive disorder, becomes inflammation, becomes the fawn response, becomes resentment, and resentment is like taking poison and wanting the other person to die. So now codependency and chronic pain and chronic illness, there is a huge tie into that nobody's talking about. Nobody really talks about the link between the fawn response and the codependent solution to not feeling seen and chronic illness. So we talk about these. You can take naturopathic supplements, you can take medications.
You can do meditation.
You can even try mindfulness meditation, but without going back there and revisiting exactly the identity that was formed when you did not have your needs met, one being the grandiose, one being the codependent. If we don't address those, nothing on the outside will ever work. We will repeat those patterns. We will get into these toxic push-pull dynamics, chronic pain, chronic illness, chronic inflammatory issues, and just depression, and then feeling like you're stuck in a codependent cycle. And I see this so often with my chronic pain patients that I was like, I got to get out of chiropractic, because they just go to doctors looking for a surrogate parent. And the people with chronic pain, and chronic illness, don't realize that what they're doing is they're transferring their unhealed, unmet needs from their parents to doctors and therapists. And now we have an entire industry of doctors and therapists designed to help meet those unmet needs, but they're not doing anything. Talk to any medical doctor and they'll tell you, people with chronic pain and chronic illnesses, like, we can't help them. We're just kissing the boo here.
I want to talk about the overview experience, because I know people would like to take something more than just our conversation when they get off of here. So tell us about that.
Yeah, the first step is to understand your attachment style. So there's an invitation to fill it out. It's 5 minutes long, and then you get the answer of what your attachment style is. And the next step is to jump in and do the work. Is, okay, so what do I do? Is like, I teach in the overview experience. It's a methodology that I had to embody in order to become trigger proof, in order to learn when the trigger comes up, what's happening in my body. So I go through the nervous system. I get to an understanding of what's really happening in the body. and then a pathway where I can then become my own medicine rather than needing somebody outside to soothe me. I become the one that I'm seeking. And so it's a nervous system reset. It's a cognitive understanding of why we get into the situations we do, and then a tool, an embodiment practice where you learn how to resolve the core wound that has you showing up unconscious in those relationships. It's a 6-hour event. During COVID, it used to be a 3-day event, and during COVID, I had these events planned all over the world.
Oh, sure.
People booked in, and then all of a sudden COVID hit and I had to cancel them. And I was like, what the heck do I do? And I thought, can I take this 3-day event and turn it into a 6-hour, condensed version and put it on Zoom and have the same results? And I was like, let me give it a try. And holy crap, it was amazing. And it became super popular because people didn't have to fly. People didn't have to spend money on the travel and the hotel. And it's super affordable. And it gives people the answer to what they were missing. What people say is like 30 years of therapy in 6 hours. And so that's what the overview experience is. Because when you leave that, you're a different person than when you came in.
That is certainly a testimonial.
Yeah, it's all there.
And then tell me quickly about the membership is called again, what?
The Cycle Breakers Collective.
Okay. And is that on your website somewhere?
No, I don't invite people.
Oh.
It's not open to the public.
Okay.
You'd have to experience the overview experience to see if this work is right for you. I don't just like publicly let everyone in. It's a trauma-informed group, so not everybody comes in with the right intentions, and so we have a little bit of a screening process, and you want to see how you do with the overview method. You want to see how the community is, and because this work is really sacred and people are there for the right reason, so I want to make sure that everybody's there for the right reason. So coming to the overview experience is like the first step. And then afterwards, there's an opportunity to hop on a call and see what you got out of it and help integrate and to see if this type of work is right for you. It's mainly for people who've done talk therapy, who've done all the Tony Robbins and the personal development and the Byron Katie and the John DeMartini, and they've really been seeking and they're frustrated because there's something they feel like is missing. I love to show off that I had to discover it for myself. I found it. And so I really appreciate those who really get the distinction of how this work is different. So attending the overview experience is probably the best first step.
And did you say how often do you run those?
I run them once a month.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So your website is drnima, Nima.com.
Correct.
And you have other resources, there's blogs, if people want to read more about you.
There's a ton of information on the website.
Good stuff. And of course, the registration for the overview experience is on that page. And you have a TV channel, Dr. Nima TV.
Yeah, 100%. It's Dr. Nima TV. It's my YouTube channel.
We love YouTube. Did you know that YouTube far surpasses Google in search engine requests for information?
I love YouTube.
Yeah,
a lot of people appreciate the stuff that we put out there.
Yeah, I'll bet. This has been really informative and much more in-depth than I've heard before on this idea of narcissism. And I just love that whole explanation and why they attract each other makes so much more sense to me.
You asked, how do you break free? And the way that you break free is really understanding how you got into it in the first place. Unless you really understand the mechanisms, you cannot break free. So a big part of my education is helping people understand why we become violent, why we choose the partners that we do, why we keep going back, why we can't let go. Why is it that I say I want to do one thing, but then I do the exact opposite? Why is it that I can help my friend on a coffee date and tell them exactly what their problem is and how easily that they need to do this and this, yet in my life I do something completely, totally freaking opposite. Right. So I love showing why, I love giving the answers to why, because once you understand that, now understanding breathes life into the solution.
And I just have to say, you don't necessarily not like I didn't go back for a year.
in your
It just
relationship,
because I didn't do the work, I didn't have anybody that explained anything like that. I was doing the work by going to events and reading books and listening to tapes and doing
which is
meditation,
good,
and
which is a
which
good
was
start.
super helpful to me in my
Yeah,
life in general.
I love it.
And a year later, when it came time for this person to say, "Hey, I'm moving to your neighborhood. How about it?" I was like, "Nah, no, not really." And sure enough, there we were
You did.
again after not
Well,
too long.
you're referring to something really important, Greg, and this is there's two types of change. There's first order change and second order change. And what happens is in these relational dynamics, oh my gosh, I cheated on you. I'm sorry. Okay, here's what we'll do. You can see my phone. I'm going to do date nights with you every week. I'll give you access to my phone. I'm going to take you out and I'm going to be more affectionate. This is called first order change. First order change is this happened and these are the changes I'm going to start to do so that we can solve this. First order change doesn't work. Second order change is what I'm describing and I'm interested in. Second order change, Greg, is when you say, all right, I cheated on you. I've been really harmful to you. I am going to find out the root cause of why I did that. Instead of saying, oh yeah, it's really shitty behavior and I'm just going to stop and I'm going to buy you more flowers and here you can unlock my phone whenever you want, I'm going to go and find out why I find myself in those situations where I feel like I need to cheat on you, why I react that the way that I do. I'm going to find the root of it and I'm going to heal at the root of that. And that requires a depth and vulnerability and a shift of identity that most people we can't get from reading books. Even listening to this podcast isn't going to give it to you.
No.
But it's information. But embodiment and second order change requires us to go deeper. And that's what I'm inspired to teach people how to do.
I love it. And I know that no podcast will ever change somebody, but I hope that some people listening, it will put a light bulb on, or it will give them a deeper sense of curiosity about what's going on in their life or what they can do different or how they can
Yeah.
heal themselves mentally, physically.
And inspire them to find somebody, whether it's myself or
Right.
somebody else, doesn't matter, but you need to get support to break the habit of being yourself.
Yeah.
You will not just change it just by listening to a podcast. Whether you're finding myself as your guide, you need to get support in changing that habit.
Dr. Nima, thank you so much for your time and expertise. I have loved every minute of this, and I hope the listeners have too.
Thank you, Greg.
People, I'll be back next week with another fabulous guest. Be well till then.